In a high-stakes moment during the Senate Judiciary Committee hearings, Senator Cory Booker, known for his pointed questioning and passionate stance on social justice, turned his focus to Pam Bondi, the former Florida Attorney General. Booker, a Democrat, had been critical of Bondi in the past, especially regarding her ties to controversial figures and decisions that appeared to align with partisan interests. His challenge came as a direct attack on Bondi's ability to serve impartially as Attorney General. Booker began by questioning Bondi's legal philosophy, particularly her previous actions and public statements about the importance of law and justice. His questions were meant to highlight any potential biases she may bring to the position of Attorney General, a role that demands neutrality and independence from political pressures. With his reputation for holding powerful figures accountable, Booker's questions were poised to scrutinize Bondi's past actions under the microscope of her potential future position. Bondi, who had served as Florida's Attorney General and was deeply familiar with legal intricacies, responded with poise. She maintained a calm demeanor, never showing signs of being rattled by Booker's aggressive questioning. Bondi immediately defended her record, asserting that her tenure as Attorney General had always been about upholding the rule of law and ensuring fairness. She pointed to her leadership in various legal matters, including high-profile cases where her office had successfully taken action against fraudsters and human traffickers. In her defense, Bondi emphasized her commitment to the Constitution and the legal framework that guided her work, making it clear that personal biases would never interfere with her duties. She acknowledged her past ties with certain figures but was quick to assert that she had always acted in accordance with the law, regardless of political affiliations. Booker, however, was not satisfied with Bondi's defense and pressed further. He raised concerns about her history of making political statements that seemed to favor partisan agendas. One of the most contentious points Booker highlighted was her involvement in the impeachment defense of President Donald Trump. Booker questioned whether Bondi's participation in such a politically charged case could affect her impartiality, particularly if she were to oversee investigations involving political figures. He questioned whether a person who had supported Trump's legal defense could objectively manage the Department of Justice, a body that often deals with sensitive cases involving politicians. Booker's challenge was clear. He wanted to know whether Bondi's political background would be a hindrance to her capacity to lead the Department of Justice in an unbiased manner. In response, Bondi's strategy was to focus on her legal expertise and experience. She reminded the committee that her involvement in Trump's defense was solely based on her legal knowledge and expertise in the law, rather than her personal political beliefs. Bondi firmly rejected the idea that her professional obligations could be compromised by personal politics. She argued that the role of Attorney General demanded a focus on the law above all else, and that's what she had always done in her previous roles. Bondi highlighted how, during her tenure as Attorney General of Florida, she had often found herself at odds with politicians from both sides of the aisle when it came to upholding justice. By framing her response this way, Bondi sought to convey that she had always put the law above political considerations. Despite Bondi's confident responses, Booker wasn't ready to back down. He continued to challenge Bondi on the topic of legal impartiality, referencing her past public comments about contentious issues. Booker particularly honed in on Bondi's stance regarding the 2020 election. While Bondi had publicly acknowledged that Joe Biden had won the election, Booker pressed her on whether she had been fully transparent about her views on voter integrity and the electoral process. This line of questioning was a thinly veiled attempt to push Bondi into a corner regarding her stance on the political upheaval that had followed the 2020 election results. Booker, using the broader context of her political affiliations, was attempting to show that her impartiality could be compromised, potentially undermining the public's trust in the Department of Justice. Pam Bondi, however, was well prepared for the Booker's lines of questioning. She responded by restating her commitment to transparency and legal integrity. Bondi pointed out that her role in defending Trump during the impeachment process was strictly a professional, legal decision. She stressed that her personal opinions would never impact her professional decisions as Attorney General. Bondi was quick to remind the committee that her stance on any political issue, including the 2020 election, had always been grounded in respect for the law and the Constitution. She had no qualms about following the legal process as it had been laid out by the courts, and her responses were intended to assure the committee of her integrity. Bondi then took a massive step to disarm Booker's challenge by offering a broad vision for how she would lead the Department of Justice. She emphasized that her focus as Attorney General would be on restoring the public's trust in the department, which she noted had been eroded in recent years. She outlined several key priorities, including combating violent crime, improving transparency, and ensuring equal treatment under the law. Bondi took the opportunity to highlight her achievements as Florida's Attorney General, noting how she had worked across the aisle with Democrats and Republicans to achieve positive outcomes in areas like human trafficking and consumer protection. Bondi's move to focus on her professional accomplishments and forward-looking goals was an effort to shift the conversation away from partisan politics and back to the law. Despite Bondi's attempt to steer the conversation back to her record, Booker didn't relent. He continued to challenge her on the broader implications of her appointment. Booker raised questions about whether Bondi's history of defending partisan positions would make it difficult for her to serve all Americans equally. He pointed out that the Attorney General must be a figure of unity, someone who puts the public's interest above party lines. Booker questioned how Bondi would be able to represent all people fairly, given her history of political involvement. He stressed that the Department of Justice had to be above reproach, and that Bondi's past actions raised concerns about her ability to represent all Americans impartially. Bondi, however, stood firm in her resolve. She assured the committee that her loyalty was not to any political party but to the American people. She reminded the committee that her career had been about fighting for fairness and justice, not about political allegiances. Bondi argued that her legal philosophy was one based on the Constitution and the rule of law, not on partisan political considerations. She noted that, throughout her career, she had frequently found herself in situations where doing the right thing meant going against political pressure. Her response was a direct challenge to Booker's accusations, attempting to neutralize the criticism by reaffirming her commitment to the law above all else. As the questioning drew to a close, it was clear that the exchange between Booker and Bondi had become one of the defining moments of the hearing. Bondi had effectively countered Booker's attempts to challenge her impartiality by focusing on her legal credentials and her commitment to upholding the law. Booker, on the other hand, had made his point that Bondi's partisan history could pose a risk to the Department of Justice's credibility. The tension in the room was palpable, and while no definitive conclusions had been drawn, both sides had made their case. The atmosphere suggested that the committee would have to weigh these competing arguments carefully before making its final decision. After the hearing, Bondi's performance was widely analyzed by political commentators. Some praised her ability to deflect Booker's challenges and maintain her composure under pressure. They highlighted her extensive legal background and her focus on restoring trust in the Department of Justice. On the other hand, critics continued to question her ability to separate her political past from her duties as Attorney General. They argued that her involvement in Trump's impeachment defense, combined with her history of partisan advocacy, made it difficult to believe she could serve as a neutral arbiter of the law. Booker's questioning of Bondi also became a focal point for many, with some applauding his efforts to hold the nominee accountable for her past actions. Critics, however, argued that his approach was too aggressive and that he had not given Bondi the opportunity to fully explain her position. The hearing, like many in the Senate Judiciary Committee, had become a battleground of competing narratives. The stakes were high, as the outcome would determine who would lead the Department of Justice at a time when the country was deeply divided politically. As the confirmation process continued, Bondi's fate remained uncertain. Some senators expressed doubts about her ability to serve impartially, while others rallied behind her, citing her legal expertise and experience. The final vote would be a close one, as many in the Senate were torn between supporting her qualifications and questioning her ability to rise above her political past. In the end, Pam Bondi's nomination was approved, but the controversies surrounding her confirmation would not be easily forgotten. Her time as Attorney General would be closely watched, as critics continued to scrutinize her decisions and actions. For Booker, the challenge he posed to Bondi had sparked a broader debate about the politicization of the Department of Justice and the importance of impartiality in the legal system. The battle between Booker and Bondi had shown that even in the highest levels of government, partisan politics and personal history would continue to shape the future of American law.